Welcome, everybody. I'm Bridget Perino, and thank you so much for dialing in today and joining this inaugural Women in Propane Leadership Lens webinar. I'm very excited to host this today. We've got a large contingent of people who have signed on for the event, and we're really excited to bring this to you. We're very fortunate also today to be joined by the current chair of Women in Propane, Jennifer Jackson, and I'd like to introduce her and have her give us a little bit of a welcome to this exciting event. Jennifer?
Good afternoon and welcome. I am excited to welcome all of you to the kickoff of our brand new series, our very first Leadership Lens live webinar. I would also like to give a big thank you to our sponsor for this first webinar today, ARM Solutions. We are grateful for your support and we appreciate your sponsorship. Women in Propane was established to provide opportunity for men and women throughout our industry to support the advancement and success of all employees in every scope of business operation and professional development. Founded by women, the Council's mission champions the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I encourage you all to check out our website, womeninpropane.org, where you can explore opportunities to get involved. Learn about our DISC on the road leadership trainings, our state association's engagement committee and ambassador opportunities that we have open. Join our knowledge exchange mentoring program as a mentor or a mentee, and explore our new Through the Leadership Lens podcast series, as well as learn about new upcoming webinars that we will have in this series. So thank you all for joining us today. Bridget?
Thank you, Jennifer. And of course, as many of you know, Jennifer is the Director of Territory Operations at AmeriGas, and she's brought a big contingent of her colleagues to this event today. So thank you, Jennifer. She's been in the LPG propane industry since 2025 in various roles in service and delivery routing, district management, area management, and recently regional vice president, and today as a director. So thank you so much again, Jennifer, for being the chair of the Women in Propane Executive Council and being on the executive team for such an extended period due to COVID. You know, you probably didn't realize you were signing up for such a long term when you took that step a few years ago now. So we really appreciate that, you and all of the experience that you bring to the table as a DISC trainer for DISC on the Road, and also serving as a product manager for the Knowledge Exchange Mentor program that we have, and for your work on all the NPGA committees on which you serve. So, you know, as an effective leader, as combining with your passion for workforce diversity and development, and guiding the Women in Propane Council to new initiatives and sustainability, we're so lucky to have you in our organization and for all the work that you have been able to achieve in this role. Thank you so much. I am moving on to the featured speaker of the session today, and we're very lucky to also have Danielle DeLibero on the session. Danielle is the SVP of People and Culture at Inova, and she's spent over 20 years building and retaining talented teams. And actually, speaking with Danielle, she believes there's no more relevant time in the propane industry than now to focus in on building skills in emotional intelligence. So we'll find out a little bit more about that shortly. As I mentioned, she's with me at Inova. She's the SVP of People and Culture, guiding our ship. We're an industrial IoT supplier in the industry, but she has a long history in people and culture leadership roles in this industry and others. She's a very active volunteer in multiple organizations, including Hire Black, which is part of the hireblacknow.com organization. She's also an experienced conference presenter. She's got an English Lit and America Lit background from the bachelor's from the University of South Florida, and a master's in organizational leadership and HR management from Quinnipiac University. And just a literal stash of certificates in leadership, diversity, equity and inclusion in the workplace, and post-crisis leadership. That was very timely, Danielle. And those are all from the University of South Florida. She's also serving on a number of advisory boards as well. Local here to New Jersey with me, she's in Hoboken, and she lives there with her husband and her son. So Danielle,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
My goodness, thank you. Thank you so much for such a great introduction, and thank to Bridget, obviously to Jennifer, and of course, how wonderful for ARM Solutions to be our sponsor. This is the first Leadership Lens webinar in the series, and I'm just delighted to be here with all of you. Thank you for taking this time, whether you're here live or you're going to watch it later recorded. It's here for you to use as a tool. All of these webinars will be tools for you to keep in your toolkit as you go through your career and through your personal life. So let's kick it off. In terms of our mood, how are we feeling? How's your energy today? Are you feeling pleasant? Are you feeling energized? Are you ready for this? Maybe not, and that's okay too. Remember, your mood is not an indicator of your personality. It's simply just how you're feeling. So what you see on the screen now is what's called a mood meter. And I want to tell you a little story about this mood meter. Bridget was there. As she mentioned, we worked together in Nova. The Nova leadership team recently did a full day strategy session. And to kick off the day, we put this mood meter up and we asked everyone before we started any conversations, pick the word. How were you feeling that morning? If you were comfortable sharing the why behind the choice, by all means, please do so. But when there were the 7 of us sitting in the room, as expected, we had 7 different words and 7 different places on this map. And of course, for 7 different reasons. Someone had a terrible commute in. So obviously, irritated is a great word to use. I'm sure they probably would have used other words, but irritated was that they picked. Another person had just finished up a high profile project and they jumped on the word elated. And then for those who've ever been in this situation, we had another colleague who had just had a newborn and they zeroed right in on that word exhausted. So we found that by sharing this before the meeting, it just grounded us and reminded us that there is just so much more going on in our lives besides that one meeting that we're presently in, like now. So I don't want you to get the wrong idea. We don't do this exercise before every meeting. That's almost impossible. But the takeaway we had was, I can do this before every meeting for myself. I can check my own mood and I can be aware of my word. And then remember that the odds are pretty slim that everyone else in the room is going to pick the same word too. So I see you're probably all looking at the screen and zeroing in, probably trying to decide, well, I could be one or this one today, and that's okay. But take your time. Now it's your turn. How are you today? And remember, not just in this meeting and not about your personality, just right now, emotionally, physically, mentally. Take a look at the words and try to remember the quadrant, the color it's in, right? That top right quadrant, that's yellow, energized and hopeful. The bottom right quadrant is the green hue, that's pretty chill and balanced. The bottom left quadrant is blue, so a little, maybe that exhausted person, a little glum. And perhaps you're up in the left, top left corner, and that's red, so stressed, right? Stressed. I'm sure I'm red a good portion of the week. So take a moment, look at the words, and we're going to pull up the poll. Bridget, would you mind pulling up that poll? Take a minute, share with us if you can. Where are you? Are you yellow? Are you green? Are you blue? Red? Looks like the results are coming in.
They were quick off the mark on that one, Danielle.
That everybody, people know their word. Let me tell you, people, you know how you feel. Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, it looks like we have about 100% of our participants, about 75, 80% of our participants are answering. So I appreciate that. We'll stop the poll, but if we can keep the results up for a second, Bridget, you can see we have, and I apologize, I have a few screens open here, but let me bring the polls into my view here. A good portion of us are green, more than 50% are green, but not everybody. Some are yellow, some are blue, some are red, a good split there. But I would say if we were live and we were together, the 26 people who were green probably don't all have the same word either, though, in the green. So I thank you all for participating. Bridget, we could take the results down, but what I want to remind you all is to take that moment, identify how you feel. Think for a second before you enter a situation, what other words were on that list? What other words would other people might be feeling? That is the foundation of building your emotional intelligence. Now I could end the webinar here, but I'm not going to, but that is the first foundation. And so thank you for that. Now, we've all heard of IQ, but welcome to EQ. Life is full of unexpected situations. Some people, as Bridget said, I have a young son. We like to say in our house that stuff happens. You, again, may have other words. That's always going to happen, but how we respond is what truly impacts the outcome. And so I want to put up an equation for you to take a look at. Have you ever seen this equation before? E plus R equals O. Feel free to use the chat buttons open if someone knows it or has a guess, but E plus R equals O. E plus R equals O is events always are going to happen. We can't control those. Life happens, stuff happens. The R is our response. How you choose, how I choose to respond will then create that outcome. And different outcomes will occur based only on the response. Now, Brian Kite here, he is the founder of Daily Discipline, has really great his own webinars and his own training and daily disciplines he sends out. But he put this really great quote out there about, if you have the right mindset, a world of opportunity opens. So much becomes possible. But with the wrong mindset, it just is going to feel like an unfair world. It's going to be full of adversity. And you won't even be able to see the opportunities in front of you when everything looks impossible. I think that's a really powerful statement. Now, I'm not asking you all to go and, again, change your personalities and become, bright, cheery folks if that's not your way. It's not about your personality again. It's simply the emotional intelligence of, in this moment, what do I use to respond to what's happening? So let's talk about some key elements of emotional intelligence. I think this graphic is a great way to sort of remember it's not overwhelming. It shouldn't feel overwhelming. There aren't 100 things to remember. There are 5 elements. And again, you don't have to remember all 5, but we're going to walk through all 5 of them on this webinar just to give you that foundation. So right there in the middle of the wheel, I think you can see there's a very high level definition of EQ. It's the ability to identify and manage your own emotion as well as other people's emotions. Now, it's hard to manage other people's emotions. We get that. But if we can start to learn how to manage our own, we can then help that outcome of how the other people will respond. So again, thinking constantly back to that equation, our mood meter, and then what other people's mood meter words might be and how we can help control that. So we'll dig into each of these. We'll provide some new perspectives. We might do some exercises. So stay alert because we're going to keep polling and asking you to participate. And we're going to figure out ways to help you exercise that EQ muscle. So the next time you're in a position where the R is truly up to you, you might have some tips and tools to respond differently the next time. So let's start at the top. We've got self-awareness. That's in the top right corner. That one's purple. Then we had self-regulation as we move our way clockwise. Empathy is right there down at the 6 o'clock bottom of the circle. Motivation as we make our way around in yellow, and then social skills up on the top left. Now, I read them clockwise. That's how we're going to go through them in that order. You need to look at this and say these 5 elements really can be in any order. Not one is more important than the other. So let's talk about the first one, self-awareness. Daniel Goleman is widely considered to have coined the term emotional intelligence. He wrote a book back in 1996 called Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. And that's when he introduced the notion that people with a high self-awareness are aware of their moods as they're having them. So how about you? Do you perhaps recognize your emotions as you're experiencing them? Do you know your own strengths and weaknesses? Do you ask people for feedback or advice on what you're doing well or how well you can improve? So knowing that about yourself is one thing, but self-awareness is more than just about your own internal self-awareness. It's also about how well you understand how others see you. So as we move to the next slide, you'll see that we have this chart here. Again, I'm going to ask for some interactive. So for those who went somewhere else, come back for a second. On that left-hand side of the screen, we have those two axes. We have internal self-awareness and we have external self-awareness. So like we did a moment earlier, what is your level of self-awareness? Take a moment and plot yourself on this chart. As you can see, it goes low to high and then low to high. So in that first quadrant on the top left, it's a high sense of how well you know yourself, but maybe you're not 100% sure of how others perceive you. Moving to the right, you've got number 2. It's a high sense of myself and a pretty darn good high sense of how others see me. Number 3, that bottom left, is low, of a pretty low sense of how I'm doing, but I also have a low sense of how others might see me. And then the number 4 quadrant to the bottom right is a low sense of myself, but I actually have a pretty good high sense of how others see me. So take a moment and plot yourself in your quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4. And Bridget, I think, has brought up that poll, which is great. And if you can take a minute and put yourself in there. Wonderful. Wow. It's interesting to watch it shift as everyone's going along. And we've got, now, as those are coming up, I will tell you that, and this plot comes from Harvard Business Review. Part of this study with this plotting actually told the reader that even though people plot themselves and they truly believe that they are self-aware, only about 10 to 15% of people actually fit the criteria where they think they're supposed to be. So Bridget, we can stop that poll and look at this for a second. So again, we have a good portion, almost 30% of our folks on the call who have high internal. Let me look here. Did I do that? High internal, low external. So they feel good about regulating themselves, how they're feeling, but they're not 100% sure how people maybe perceive them. We have almost the exact number of people who say, I know me and I know how people see me. Low internal, low external. I'm not 100% there yet with myself, but with that, I also don't necessarily know how others are perceiving me. And then there's this high internal, high external, where I've got a good understanding of where I am. So wonderful, everyone. Thanks for sharing. We can take that poll down. And then we've changed the plotting a little bit so you can see the words behind that graph. Again, the top left, introspectors, that was the 1, the high internal, low external. The aware are those who are high, high. Your seekers were the 3s. They were the low, low. And then the pleasers are the low, high. So we'll just wait a moment so you can take a look and read those for a second. And again, read those descriptors, because maybe now that you're reading them, you're thinking, that's not me, or spot on. Yep, that is me. So again, as we said, only about 10 to 15% of the people who have been studied actually fit the criteria they think they belong in. And we said earlier, it's a muscle. We're going to need to work at it. We're going to need to exercise it. And so let's give some tips, if we can, on self-awareness. So the first tip, and we'll do this after every deep dive, we'll give some tips. The first tip for self-awareness is explore mindfulness. Mindfulness is, some people think it's just meditating, or it's going to yoga, or it's just, eating right. It's really the whole practice of patience, acceptance, not being non-judgmental, letting go, trusting. So explore that mindfulness. Before I move on to the next one, I want to just caveat this and say, these are tips. They are not prescribed that you have to do all of them. They are simply out there for you to maybe try one or two and see which one works for you. The next one is keep a journal about your day and the day's events. But more importantly, jot down how you responded to some of those events. Just doing that will help you analyze your emotional responses. Why does that get under your skin? Why does that other thing make you so happy? What was it about that? And then that will help you look for those body triggers the next time around. Ask for honest feedback. Do you have trusted friends, trusted colleagues? Maybe even your manager is someone you could feel really comfortable opening up and talking, very transparently about how you're feeling. Talk about those with people around you. Do a personal SWOT analysis for yourself. And finally, for self-awareness, be present in the moment. If all you're doing in a meeting is thinking back on, in that last meeting, I should have done this, or when I see them again, I'm going to do that, you're not present. You're already getting ready for something else. Be present, be aware. How are you feeling right now? Your physical manifestation of what's going on will show itself. We're all different. It'll show itself differently for each of us. So only you can say, this is what's going on. And again, like I said, you don't have to do all of these. You don't even have to do any of these. But here are some tips, and try to find something that resonates for you. So now that you're also self-aware, why don't we jump into the second one, which is self-regulation. It's interesting. If anyone's ever been around children, they are the worst at self-regulation. And yet, as adults, we constantly are expecting them to be more mature, understand what's going on, be able to stop crying, stop this, stop. And yet, as adults, so many of us have difficulty self-regulating and staying in control. So to develop some of the skills in this area, you have to learn how to manage your emotions effectively. And we're not just talking negative emotions. There's some happy emotions that we don't manage effectively either. So the definition up top says it allows you to wisely manage your emotions and your impulses. And that's a key word in there. So do you lose your temper when you feel frustrated? Do you know how to calm yourself down when you're feeling anxious or upset? Do you find it difficult to move on when you're feeling frustrated or unhappy? What triggers these feelings? And what techniques can you use to self-regulate? So let's do some tips here. First and foremost, again, impulses was the key word, I think, in that definition. Don't react immediately. It's so hard not to. Our bodies, we are fight or flight or faint. We've been taught this. It is innate to us. But if you can take that moment to not react immediately, it is probably the most difficult thing, but it is probably the most crucial one. It allows you to immediately stop, and it'll open up the door for you to do the rest of these tips. So the first is, just like we talked about self-awareness, monitor your own body for clues. Does your heart start to beat really fast? Do you sweat? Are you unable to think clearly? Do you have urgency all of a sudden? So know your body, look for them, and then what do you need to start to pinpoint into each of those clues to calm yourself down? Taking a deep breath, just breathe, just breathe. We hear it all the time. Studies show that the host of benefits associated with the simple act of breathing will just calm our mind and our body. And actually, once you do that, it just creates some space for logical thinking. And you hope it creates some space for a compassionate response. Thinking for 5 seconds, well, after you take that breath, there's this conscious moment to think about, what is the other person needing right now? And again, I'm not saying deflect and don't make this about you, but if this is something that's going on between you and someone else, you might need to really also think for 5 seconds about, let me take this whole situation into perspective versus just how I'm feeling. Now, a pause can feel uncomfortable. It sure does sometimes, especially in a moment, but it lets the other person know that you are pondering their concerns. Now, being able to pause is also difficult for some folks. And so some tricks you might have is have a stalling statement. What's your stalling statement? What's the one that you can have ready at any time to make sure that you remember to pause? How about, that's an interesting idea. Let me think about it. Well, I just bought myself 5 seconds. I think I heard this morning in a meeting, someone say, I'm not prepared to make a decision right now. Can I come back to you? Absolutely. Sure. And there are definitely moments in the workplace where we disagree with people. It happens in every workplace. And instead of trying to win or argue a statement, another way to pause is to say, well, that's a unique perspective. Would you mind providing me some more details or some insights? Or how did you draw to that conclusion? A stalling statement, not a stalling statement to deflect or to avoid the conversation, but a stalling one that gives you that space to breathe and take that moment to start to think more clearly. Now, there are moments where we need to just walk away. It happens in life, and that's okay. But remember, if you have to distance yourself from a person or a situation, and you know that about yourself, sometimes it is the best thing to do to save the relationship long term. And so these are the 5 tips I have, but I would ask you, which do you think you will try? Have you ever done any of these? Do you think there's another one that you do that the group might benefit from? Bridget, can we bring up a poll and ask if the team could answer and put in, which one they think they might try, which one might work for them? And by all means, if there's another one, maybe we could put it in the chat function. You could say other and then type it in the chat. This is a great opportunity for us to share and learn from each other. It looks like we do have a few others coming in, which is nice. Yeah, that breathing deep, taking a drink of water. Well, I'll take a drink of water while you're all doing that poll. So wonderful. We could pause. We could stop the poll there. We have about 80% of our folks. So this is what it looks like. We have a good portion of our participants here are going to take a deep breath and a sip of water, whether they do that now or they'll try that in the future. We have the stalling statement. Hopefully, if that's something you're already doing, great. If that's new for some of you, I hope that you find that useful. We've got the thinking for 5 seconds, the distancing yourself. Of course, you can't always just walk away. So know when that's the right move, and then monitoring your body and some others. So again, if whoever the 2 were that put in for other, if you can throw that in the chat, if it's appropriate to do so, it'd be great to share with this team. So thank you, everyone. It's all wonderful advice. So I'll move now to the 3rd. And the 3rd is empathy. And empathy is defined as the ability to identify and understand others' emotions. Have you ever told someone or been told by someone that you're a good listener? Have you found it difficult to read other people's emotions? Have you used active listening skills when others speak to you? Now, when I was in university, and Bridget mentioned earlier, I have my undergraduate degree in English and American literature. So a lot of the professors have word jokes. The professor walked in on the first day, Professor Smith, I swear that's his name. And he came in and he said, does anybody know the difference between empathy and sympathy? And we looked around at each other, and before we could even raise our hand or answer him, he simply announced, I don't know and I don't care. Now, as an English major, I chuckle. I find that joke funny. Some of you might still be going, oh, I get it. Not so funny, Danielle, but I get it. But the thing is, he's right. And I never forgot that lesson. Empathy is the knowing, while sympathy is the caring. We're talking about empathy in emotional intelligence. I'm not asking you in emotional intelligence to have sympathy for someone. I'm asking you to be empathetic. I'm asking you to think about knowing and understanding the other person's situation. So earlier I asked some of you how you were today. Some of you were red, some of you were yellow. Do you think by knowing someone else's color or knowing that about someone, it might help you in a conversation, or it might help you with an interaction, and it might help you be the R in that E plus R equals O? It's the knowing that allows us to be more empathetic. It's the knowing that allows us to be able to respond to the situation that we're in. So some tips for empathy: be an active listener. Make that effort to hear not only the words someone's using, but also their nonverbal messages, that nonverbal, their body language. Can you trade places with the person? Remember the saying, walk a mile in my shoes. Well, take that moment and put yourself in another person's situation. See it from their perspective if you can. As we talked about a little bit earlier with self-regulation, can you make enough space so you can be compassionate? Can you start with compassion? We all have different thresholds of tolerance. If we start an interaction, we start our response with intolerance, we're already deep down here in the red. If we start with compassion, we're already up in the yellow and the greens, and it's a different approach. Remember, we all have different thresholds of tolerance. We all have different thresholds of pain. We all have different life experiences. So what may not be a big deal to you may in fact be a point of suffering for somebody else. So if you can start with the compassion, again, I'm not asking you to be sympathetic. I'm asking you to try to understand the other person and where they may be coming from, and to start with compassion. Can you validate someone's experience? I know I've done this, so I'm not saying believe me, far from perfect. I've done this, but I now catch myself. Has anyone ever started to have a conversation and you're telling a story and you say, and then you'll never believe, and this happened, and you are maybe really upset and you're really, and you just want to talk to somebody, and the person you're telling the story to goes, oh, me too, but mine wasn't that bad. Or, oh, you think yours is bad? Wait till I tell you about my experience. Well, what just happened? You didn't validate my experience. You actually just dismissed my experience and made it all about you. So really, if someone's talking to you, someone's sharing with you, somebody's opening up to you, somebody's in a position, let's think about validating the experience they're having and move on from there. How about instead of, that's not so bad, maybe say, I hear what you're saying. Or, wow, that must have made you feel very happy. Again, these don't all have to be negative. I apologize. I think I went to a few sad and upset stories here, but they could be very happy situations. So let's try to validate someone's experience. And finally, empathy really comes from, and this one's a tough one, to really think creatively. Usually when we find empathy for someone, or we practice empathy, it's because we're drawing upon our own experiences when we enter the situation. So it becomes difficult to think differently because we're taught that, right? We're taught that to think, when I was in this situation, it goes way back into our brains, filed away of when I was in the situation last time, this is how I survived, or this is how I reacted, and I'm okay. And so all of a sudden, you're now in this position. To think differently is to almost stop your brain from that muscle memory of bringing up previous experience and trying to think differently. So we had a very lively conversation in the office this week. And hopefully, I don't know if Bridget's still on camera, but if you could see her face, she was also part of this conversation. So one of the things we were talking about was when you're driving. So for those who have a driver's license or a car and are driving along, there are usually times in our entire driving lifetime where someone might actually race past you so fast and maybe even cut you off, or maybe zigzagging in traffic. What is your response to that? Now, you remember how you've responded, and so you all went there, and hopefully you're having a little bit of a chuckle, and maybe you're going, oh shoot, now that I'm self-aware and self-regulating, Janelle, probably not responding the way I should be. But if you can practice empathy and think creatively, now just hear me out, because I've been giggled at a few times this week. When that happens to me and it happened this morning, someone raced by me, all I thought was, oh my gosh, they must be rushing to the hospital. I hope they're okay. Now, it took a lot to get there. It took many years of getting there. I actually don't enjoy driving at all, so it really took a lot of creativity to get there. But by me simply putting myself in a different creative situation of what that person might be going through, I let it go a lot faster. The outcome to that event, my response, is very different than if I get worked up, if I start to speed up to catch them, if I start using different language in my car. It's a very different feeling if you can be a little bit more creative and regulate your response to the event. Because as we all know now, your response, the only thing you can control, is what actually impacts that outcome. I know some of you are probably thinking, nope, Danielle, I'm still gonna race right. That's okay. You have to know yourself. So just drive safe, everybody. The fourth one is motivation. Now, the definition is here that says being motivated consists of enjoying what you do, working towards achieving goals, and not being motivated by money or status. Now, that's different. Some people might say, oh yeah, no, I'm going to get ahead in my career so I can afford this, I can afford that. But if you really start to drill down to what is motivating you, it may not necessarily be the status. It might be getting the things you enjoy, your personal passions, your personal moral set, your personal goals. So do you find it hard to focus on something over a long term? Do you feel that you don't enjoy your work? Are you able to, and do you set long-term goals and then review that progress regularly? Well, let's think about some tips here on how to stay motivated. So boosting our motivation will help us set goals, both short-term, and I think we should have some lofty goals. So aim high, everyone. Now, aim high is great, but you got to check in regularly, and you still have to have the day-to-day goals. But having something to achieve to, that helps stay motivated. I know someone, they were looking to buy something and they weren't ready to buy it, and they wanted to hit a specific financial point in their lives before they were able to afford it, before they allowed themselves that luxury. So they printed out a picture of it, put it in a frame, and put it on their desk next to their family. And so as they did their work every day, they looked at that and they went, yep, this is I'm motivated because I know I'm going to get that someday. So again, it doesn't have to be, low-hanging fruit. You can stay motivated as well by having a very long, lofty goal. Do it now. Now, some psychologists believe that procrastination is a behavior driven by emotion. Procrastination is driven by many things. There's lots of different reasons. One of them may be based off of emotions. So if you can do something now, cross it off your list. Oh, how good does that feel? That brings us right to the next one. Celebrate the small wins. cross it off your list. I'm not saying throw a party every time you take the trash out or every time, you finish sending an email before the end of the day, but crossing something off your list, just completing something, that's a sense of achievement. It's done. It's done now. I now have time. I can move on. Seeking help and finding a mentor, I think, becomes harder and harder as we move into our career. We assume that mentors are for junior folks coming up in the ranks. Seeking help, well, I'm an expert at what they do. That's why I'm in the role I'm in. Who should I even go to for help? It's okay not to have it all figured out. There are others who have walked your path before you. Let them encourage your journey. Let them provide guidance. Let them provide insight. I'm not saying on here, take all the advice you get. I'm just saying, seek out some help. Find a mentor. Create a personal support team. Now, I happen to call mine my personal board of directors. Just like in a business, it's made up of people who have different areas of expertise, and they all have a stake in my success. They're not all friends and they're not all family. They're people I've worked with in the past. They're people I know in my life. They're people whose opinions I trust to be honest, regardless of the situation. And they share their expertise with me. And then I take all of their information, and then I am still, this last one here, accountable. I don't ask them to make a decision for me. I ask for input from my personal board of directors, and they provide me that information, and then I'm accountable. I'm motivated by being accountable. But motivation isn't just about self-motivation. There's a reason why when people start off a new exercise regime, they look to a buddy and they say, you want to walk together? Because I know if I have to meet you at 7 a.m., I'm probably going to show up because I'm accountable to you. Or I know if I pay for this, I feel like I'm more accountable than if I was just doing it for fun. So again, knowing that others rely on you, that you have to show up for someone else, that you have to make a decision that's yours and yours alone. Be accountable. Now, if you're struggling to get motivated in your current role and it lasts quite a long time, I would suggest you take some time. Think about your purpose. What makes you happy? What does motivate you? Where do you spend your extra time? And rediscover those things and maybe make some different decisions about what the next opportunity is you might want to take on, or the next project, or the next stretch goal. But again, really make sure that you're thinking that your motivation isn't just, I did this, now I do this, but it's really based on your own purpose and your own excitement and discovery. The last one is our social skills. Now, social skills are interesting, and social skills differ a little bit from region to region and country to country. And so again, there's no sort of right answer or magic bullet for social skills. But the definition is that we are effective at managing relationships that benefit everyone involved. I'm going to say it again because I think that so many of us see social skills and we think, how are we at a party? How are we at a networking event? And that's not what it is. It's about effectively managing the relationships that benefit everyone involved. So do you enjoy organizing groups, bringing people together, finding some common ground to help build rapport with others? Do you find it difficult to move on when you feel frustrated or unhappy? So what are your social skills? So now, there's a term that drives me a little batty. I think it's because I'm in people and culture, and people naturally say to me, oh, you're a people person. Well, we're all people. So let's start there. But if you're not naturally comfortable being around other people or managing relationships or being with a group, it is possible to develop those skills. So how do you develop trust and rapport with others? This is what's important. And then how do you take that trust and rapport and build good, solid relationships? Now, it could be a good, solid working relationship, a good, solid personal relationship, but all of those come through trust and rapport. So let's see how we are with our social skills. Now, it's rare that an individual can remain isolated in their office and still excel in their job since most organizations, not all, but most organizations are looking for someone with that particular skill set, the ability to work on a team, influence, motivate, get people excited about getting things done, be able to, understand who can do what, when, and how, and really, again, manage relationships, not be the last one at the company holiday party. Different. Managing relationships. So if you're uncomfortable in social situations, you can work on that self-confidence. We have a few tips here, but I would suggest that you start slowly. One-on-one. Who can you talk to? Who are you comfortable talking to one-on-one to make eye contact? And then maybe it's a group of 3, and then it's a group of 5, and then you're doing a webinar for 143 people. How can you get to the point where you feel comfortable making eye contact? Now, we talked about this earlier when we were talking about empathy. When you're making eye contact, it also indicates to the person that you're actively listening. Being an active listener is so crucial in social skills. It allows you for the next one to stay on topic. You ever been in a conversation that just quickly derails or becomes extremely awkward because in the middle of a topic, someone just starts talking about something else, totally irrelevant. And you all, scratch your head and look around and say, what just happened? Well, that was weird. That was awkward. Huh. They weren't even paying attention. They weren't present. They weren't in our moment. Think about cooperating over winning. When one person wins, it automatically indicates that someone else loses. If you're at work and you're on a team, you should look for collaboration and cooperation every time over finding a winner and a loser. Go back, try those self-regulation exercises. See if you are reacting immediately. What are your impulses? How do you stop those? And start to pause and think, is there a way for us to win together or get through this together? Anticipate, look for nonverbal cues. Nonverbal cues, as we talked about, are just that body language. If you're talking about a topic and someone starts to back away from you, I'm going to leave that there and let you think about that for a second. Are they engaged? Are they excited? Are they ready to jump right in? Or do you think they're trying to remove themselves from that situation? Someone rolls their eyes, they stammer, they sigh, they look away, they look for somebody, they look at their watch, they look at their phone, they look for those nonverbal cues. There's some really great, watch a sitcom. If you can watch, I don't know if they even make those anymore in the world of reality TV, but watch a sitcom. There's so many nonverbal cues where you watch a situation between 2 people and you just have to read the face of someone to say, oh yeah, I know how they're feeling. What does their body language do? Are they feeling proud and broad? Or are they, shirking away and trying to make themselves smaller? So look for those. Try to anticipate the feelings and the reactions of others. If I bring this up, this very personal thing I know about you in this very public setting, how do I think you're going to react and respond to it? Is this the right time to bring this up? Again, don't just have that impulse to say something or do something. Try to anticipate the feelings and reactions of others. And then ultimately understand the strengths of the group. Pulling a team together, showcasing someone else's talents, highlighting somebody's great idea, remembering that someone else knows how to do that. That's someone who, again, has great social skills. That's someone who manages the relationships with people. So I'm going to do a quick exercise. This one's a little difficult to do with a group, especially on a webinar, but if we were together, which I hope someday we can all be together again, but I look forward to that. But until then, let's think about how complex communication is. So cues and nonverbal cues and the language we use. So remember, we talked about before the saying, you walk a mile in my shoes. There's the other saying of, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Well, communicating is complex, and the meaning of a sentence can dramatically change based on where the emphasis is placed. There's a simple sentence on this slide. It's not a very exciting slide. There's one sentence on this slide. 7 words, I think. So let's take it here. You can do this where you are. I think you're all muted or in a quiet place. You could do this as well, but you could do this along with me, but I'll do it out loud for all of us. Let's try putting the emphasis on a different word. So forgive me, I'm going to say the sentence 7 times, but let's put the emphasis on a different word each time. Let's start with the first word. The first word is I. I don't think you should say that. That means something. But let's put the emphasis on the second word. I don't think you should say that. I'm going to keep going, everyone. Please, if you are saying them, and everyone is a little bit different on how they use their own tone and emphasis. The third word is think. I don't think you should say that. What about the fourth word? I don't think you should say that. The fifth word? I don't think you should say that. What about the sixth word? I don't think you should say that. And then finally, the last word. I don't think you should say that. Each of those sentences might have very well meant something different. I might as well have given you 7 different messages. And it's interesting how feelings and sentiments change based on where the emphasis is. Again, silly English lit people, our jokes are, don't put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllabic. But again, you think about, where could I have been misunderstood because I put my emphasis on the wrong word when I was talking to somebody else? Did my tone, the stress, the emphasis, did it carry through the emotional aspects of my voice? Now think about if I was in another country where I wasn't speaking my mother tongue and I was speaking a second language and didn't quite understand the nuances of where emphasis go into specific sentences. Imagine even more so how I could have been misunderstood by someone. So I urge you, if you haven't said it out loud, or if you want to use this sentence, or maybe think of a recent sentence, you even said this, I'm sure you've all said sentences this morning. Did you say something in a meeting this morning? Maybe at the coffee pot, maybe to your family before you walked out the door. These dishes better be home, better be done before I get home. Maybe during your performance review. Maybe when you were giving a performance review. What word did you emphasize? So I leave you with that and ask that if you can practice self-awareness, you can practice self-regulation and empathy for this one. These are great ways to ultimately enhance your social skills. So let's wrap this up into a summary. Recapping again, the 5 key elements of EQ are self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, motivation, and social skills. And like any muscle, it has to be exercised and it has to remain active in order to be at its peak performance. But wait, I always like to give a little bit more. You've mastered this. Congratulations. You've lived through an hour with me, and hopefully your color has shifted from the red folks have maybe moved to green or yellow or blue, and some other folks have moved around. But just because you've mastered this, it's even more effective if the people around you can adopt these habits as well. Because organizations that have a high EQ have team members who trust one another. This is transparency and accountability. They're pillars of trust. When we feel that we can talk to folks, admit our mistakes, ask for help, share our concerns, what a difference that makes when team members trust one another. When I think that I'm going to come into a situation and you are always going to assume good intent, when I assume you're always going to start with compassion, I am absolutely going to be able to collaborate with you differently and be able to ask for help and ask for questions and share concerns. When the stakes are high, it's even more important that people communicate openly. It's a clear sign of psychological safety. It also lets us innovate and learn and take risks. So bringing an intelligent team together when the stakes are high, who openly communicate, they move fast, they move forward, they innovate, they learn. That team's got optimism and drive, and they get through those times of uncertainty together. Those teams that have high EQ are unafraid to take initiative. Again, it's a clear sign of psychological safety with each other. Everyone can foster diversity and inclusion. I brushed on it very lightly because I know there'll be later webinars about this, but just in communication, someone who maybe the language you're speaking in your office, that's not their mother tongue. Emotional intelligence creates 3 of the core skills required for DE&I, for diversity, equity, and inclusion: self-awareness, empathy, and self-regulation. The people with high IQs are aware of their biases. They can empathize with people differently. They can regulate their emotions, and they better manage those interactions. And it creates an environment where people have a higher regard for a diverse group of individuals. And finally, curiosity and innovation, they're common throughout these kinds of organizations. Consistently asking thoughtful questions, seeking constructive feedback, showing patience. That's how we counter stress and negative thinking. So I put up here some resources for all of you. I thank you for your time and attention. I hope that some of these resources are helpful. There is a world of information about EQ that you can find on your own. I want to thank the Women in Propane for hosting this, ARM for sponsoring it, and to Bridget, of course, for driving today's webinar. But to all of you, you actively listened. You stayed present. I feel you were being compassionate to me. But more importantly, when a leader believes in continuous learning and remains curious, there's nothing but road ahead. And so I thank you for coming to these webinars and being part of the leadership lens. Bridget?
Thank you so much, Danielle. That was fabulous. Let me just make sure everyone can see all of us here. There we go. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, and I wanted to open the floor to any questions. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions to Danielle that you may have. But we did have a question that came in regarding a work situation, actually. Danielle, what do you suggest I do if someone keeps talking over me at work? I guess someone's in I mean, this does happen. Am I just over talking you right now?
No. And it happens a lot. And it happens not, I think the first thing is for your own self to say, are they talking over me on purpose, or are we just in a conversation where everyone's talking? So I guess that's the first thing it can feel personal when someone talks over you. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. And so I guess let's start there, is to really think about the situation. Was everybody in the room talking? Was it a loud room, a conference room? Was there no moderator to help us kind of, follow who should ask a question next? But if it happens consistently, my advice to you would be, what makes you the most comfortable? Find a place where you're comfortable and invite that person to sit down with you in a place where you feel like you're most comfortable. Is it your office? Is it taking a walk? Is it by the coffee machine? And to just one-on-one say, hey, listen, I want you to know from my perspective, what happened today and how it made me feel. And start there. And then you put the onus back on the other person. My other advice would be, if you're not comfortable doing that, if you have a confidant in the office, another peer who tends to be in similar meetings with you, that you can rely on that person to help interject and say, wait, Bridget was talking. I'd like to hear what Bridget wanted to finish. You should be helping each other out. And that's a great way to manage a meeting.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We did get a question about the recording. I put a note out to everybody. This has been recorded. We're going to edit the video to put in those poll results. They don't come automatically, and that takes a little bit of time. But everybody who registered, so if you had colleagues who couldn't join us today, everyone who's on the list who registered will get an email at some point later today, early tomorrow, and the recording will be provided in there as well. So don't worry about that. We just have one other question here. It's actually on the interview side. How do you measure, as a head of people and culture, I guess, how do you measure EQ during an interview?
Oh, well, there's a whole host of questions you can ask. You can watch body language. You can see how people are talking with you during an interview. But a question I love in an interview to help get to EQ is, I ask about previous relationships someone had with their colleagues and all different levels, with their manager, with a peer, with a subordinate. I ask what they liked about it. I asked what didn't work, why it worked. If they could replicate it in the new role, how would they do that? And so again, there's all different kinds of questions, but that's a great way. It also helps you understand people's strengths. It talks a little bit more about their experiences without violating any type of questions that you may or may not be able to legally ask.
Great, thank you. We're getting a few comments coming in the Q&A as well. Thank you so much for the very positive feedback. We're 2 minutes over time. I'm going to ask everybody to take the exit survey. Let us know how we did today, what you thought of this first event. And also there's a second question with a bunch of topics that helps us guide the future sessions. We've got some soft skill sessions on that list, and also things that are very relevant within the propane industry. So I want to thank you, Danielle. Thank you so much for a fantastic session. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here, your contribution, and for kicking off this exciting series. And everyone on the line, really appreciate you coming today, having an interest. Stay tuned. This is just the first of what we hope will be many informative, productive sessions. Thank you all. Take care.